Hi everybody, and welcome to the Facebook Live video for the P600 and R3000 printers. I'll be having my mobile ready for any questions that do pop up. Okay, basically I have an Epson R3000 here. You've got your ink bay system. The ink bay has ink lines that travel all the way to the damper unit. This is the damper unit. Okay, so on this system there are a lot of different inlets and outlets for ink to travel. On this damper system, you've got 5 regular dampers. These dampers right here, you can see that they have filters on the sides. Each damper shares 2 channels. So one damper will take control of 2 channels. Also, you've got this really kind of weird looking damper right here. This is your oddball, and this is one of the reasons why you need to flush out your printer every 2.5 to 3 months, depending on how much ink that you're using, especially on the white side. If you're using a lot of ink, you don't really have to flush as much, but you will have to flush eventually, just because the white tends to build up. So just make sure that you flush regularly so that you can unclog these filters. This is your biggest culprit. Okay, so you can see from the ink bag system to the cartridge even has a filter as well. The cartridge goes inside the ink bay. Okay, again, the ink bay has lines that flow out of it into the damper unit and then finally on top of the printhead. Okay, next we're going over cartridge types. You'll see a lot of cartridges in the market. Okay, these are your main ones. This is the cheapest cartridge you can find. They're great for only using cleaning solution to flush your printer. So if any of you are using this for ink, I would definitely not recommend using this. This is not a high quality cartridge. You'll get so much problems from using these cartridges. The ink doesn't flow nicely in here, and sometimes it's hard to prime these. These are your more high quality ones. They're a little bit thinner than these ones. You can see, and the way that the ink travels through these cartridges is actually pretty nice. This one, it's got squiggly lines going up and down, and like I said, I only recommend these when you're flushing. Never ink. Not one time should you be using these with ink. And I see a lot of people using refillable cartridges for these systems. It's not a problem to use refillables, but you have to have very good ones, and these again are not that great. Bottle systems. I really don't recommend bottle systems, only when flushing. So you've got different types of bottle systems. You can have these kind which sit in a bay. These aren't a problem either. You'll notice that there might be some really cheap ones as well that come in a rack. Those are fine as long as you're flushing. So either one isn't a problem. You just have to make sure that you elevate it over the printer, and you can just test it out. It just depends on your location. You can either have it up very high or very low. If you start to see ink or solution pouring out of your head, then you know that the height isn't correct. So you'll definitely need to change the height. So depending on your location, this height can make a big impact on the ink flow and how it comes out of the head. And again, if ink is dripping out of the head, it's either too high or too low. Also, another quick note, bottle systems are not for ink. White ink management with bag systems. Okay. With bag systems, you're going to need to shake your bags regularly. You're also going to need to shake your ink cartridge. So you'll also need to make sure that you clip this line once you take the cartridge out of the ink bay, and shake it as well. During colder seasons, you will notice that the white ink will coagulate, and it will play a big impact on how your cartridge performs, whether you have a high quality cartridge or a low quality. So regardless of the quality, you'll get some white ink building up in your cartridge and cause your cartridge to malfunction. Especially if you let your printer sit for a few days. It's not a problem if you let it sit for a few days, but if you've got these small cartridges hooked up to a bag system, you better make sure that you shake them regularly, because once the white ink starts to build up at the bottom of these cartridges, you can break it up, but it is a little bit harder to work with. So you'll notice that sometimes when you pull the ink, it may be a little bit hard to use. So just keep that in mind during cold seasons. And also, you should, regardless of the temperature, you definitely need to shake these regularly. Okay, so now to ink charges. You only want to do these when you can't really pull ink, or you've let your cartridge go to the point where you don't have any ink inside your bag. This is a really big problem, because in this system, once the ink dries, if you've let it sit for too long, then you won't be able to push it out. And just like any other printer. But these printers are very sensitive when it comes to air, which isn't a problem, and you can zap the air out right away, whether you do some head cleanings or an ink charge. On the R3000 units, you'll have to use a fresh set of chips in order to do an ink charge, because if one of the cartridges, if the ink level is too low, the printer won't allow you to complete an ink charge. On a P600 unit, this is the same effect that you'll receive if one of the cartridges is low. On the P600 though, you don't have to grab a new chipset. You can just grab a chip resetter and reset the chips, or if your printer has a decoder, you can also use the decoder to reset all the chips to make sure that they are full, and then you can do your ink charge. So it's not a complete waste if you've let air inside, but you've got to make sure that you fill your cartridges complete with ink. And I'll be showing you this as well, but with cleaning solution, so that you can see at least what you're doing and how much you will need to fill the cartridge, because I get asked this question a lot, and I see cartridges that are filled halfway or about right here, and there's about a quarter more way to go. Those both are not acceptable levels. You'll need to fill the cartridge completely. There will be some air bubbles at the top, and that's acceptable, but still, you'll definitely need to fill up this as much as possible, or you'll get air in your lines, or you won't get good nozzle checks. You'll get very inconsistent prints, and possibly clog your system. So it's very important that you do that. Okay, so now on to the bag system. Okay, I've got this clip on my line. Okay, so you'll need to at least put this first. This is a brand new cartridge, so that we're going to try to fill. Next, you'll need your blue ink connector. Well, we're going to put the blue ink connector in this tube. Make sure it fits nicely. Next we have our bag. I'll explain the bag as well. It has a valve inside that opens once this blue ink connector is inserted and twisted. So if you do get bad ink flow, sometimes when you just switch ink bags, you might want to double check to make sure that this is twisted all the way and that it's snapped and that this connector is pushed all the way in. So once the connector is off, the valve is closed and no ink or solution can come out. Okay, so going back to the bag, I'm pushing down and I'm twisting and it's there on secure. Okay, now I can hang this bag up. Okay, my bag is hung. I'm going to unclip this line. Now what I'm going to do is just let gravity take its place and let my cartridge hang low so that solution or ink can fill up the cartridge. And I can start to see it fill up. It's really not filling up too quick. So I'll just puncture the bottom of the cartridge with my syringe. This is another problem that I see with people. They don't use the correct syringe. They're using some type of metal piece at the end. This will puncture your cartridge. It will make your cartridge malfunction. You'll definitely need the perfect tip to fit in, which we have. I'm not trying to sell you a plastic tip, but we do have the ones that are made for this cartridge. So these fit properly. And they pull ink properly too from the cartridge. So now I'm going to puncture this bottom piece. Okay. You'll get more ink flow as well. I'm letting the cartridge hang low. I can also now push up with my syringe. Okay, and now I can pull. And I'm going to start to see some solution come through. Okay, so you can see the solution. What I'm actually going to do now is flip it upside down, because our goal is to try to get all of the air out of the cartridge. So by doing that, I'm going to flip the cartridge upside down and just pull, because now I'm just pulling air. As if I had it flipped over the opposite way, I would be pulling solution, and solution will eventually pull through if I have it upside down. I want to get rid of all the air first. Okay, this is the proper way to fill a cartridge. You can also have a spare bottle handy for ink or solution so you can dump it back in as long as your syringe is brand new. All of our syringes come bagged. I don't care where you get the syringe from, but as long as it's bagged, it's fine. Bagged, you'll also see that it'll say sterile. So if something is bagged, it's sterile. Non-sterile is non-bagged. Okay, so I've done a really good job of filling my cartridge. Okay, this is how a cartridge should look. Okay, I filled everything completely. There are some air bubbles up here, but that's okay. This is solution, so it's going to have some bubbles. As long as I didn't have a significant amount of space in between any of these squares. So now I can actually insert it into the printer and know that it's going to work perfectly fine. Okay, so the next thing that we could go over is taking out the cartridges, because this is another problem. We get phone calls, about 20 phone calls a day or more, on this specific subject. Like I said, air is a problem in these systems. So let's say you come into your office or your home, wherever you're printing at, and you need to shake your white ink cartridges. Okay, so first we'll make sure we clip this line so that no ink escapes from the cartridge, because once we pull the cartridge out, it will drip ink if this line is not clipped. Okay, so now I have my cartridge. I'm going to put my thumb over the bottom of the cartridge and shake. And you can also shake your bag as well, or squeeze them. Now, if you do get some type of problem where the white ink is banding, the biggest problem I see is that people leave this clipped in and start to print. Okay, that is a big no-no, because that restricts the ink flow. Another problem that I see with people not agitating the white is that it will clog this valve and not allow the valve to release any ink. So if this valve doesn't release, then this connector will not release ink as well. It will allow the cartridge to not release ink, and it will eventually malfunction because there will be restricted ink flow into the cartridge, and eventually it will blow up inside. And when I say blow up, it doesn't mean the cartridge explodes and ink goes everywhere. It will damage some of the components, maybe even this filter. It's not something that you need to worry about, and it'll happen once, but or you know, all the time. But it is something that you need to be aware of, that any possible point in restricted ink flow can come from this bag valve, this connector can malfunction, and the cartridge can malfunction. So I'm going to put this cartridge back. Now, how we can check whether a bag malfunctions or a connector is very simple. Okay? Like I said in the beginning, the bag only lets ink spill out once the connector is attached. See that? My valve is closed. I'm going to crimp this line. I'm going to take off my connector. I'm going to put it on the bag just to demonstrate that this valve is open once you put it on the bag. You see that? Once this valve is on the bag, ink can start to flow properly. So if you do get restricted ink flow, like I said, check your bag. If ink comes out of your bag without the connector, we know that the valve is not working. If we put the connector on and we see ink come out, we know that the connector is working. The next line or the next item that we would have to check is the cartridge. If the cartridge feels like it's really hard to withdraw the ink and it feels like it's concrete, then we know the cartridge is a problem. And like I said, with these systems with the white ink management, you have to make sure that the white ink is shaken, it's agitated on the back side so that the white ink doesn't build up. And this is only in these smaller units. These are more to like do-it-yourself units that I've seen, or some of the newer printers out there. This system is not a bad system. You just have to make sure that you understand it. I like bagged ink because air doesn't touch it, so I'm not opposed to bagged ink. But you just need to make sure that you take the precautions to understand the system fully, which is why I'm doing this video, because we get so many people that ask us about the system and how to troubleshoot. So I hope this video gives everyone a clear representation of these type of systems. Not that I don't want to spend the time with you on the phone, which I like talking to everybody, but there are lots of people that ask us this, and we want to make sure that people are educated about this so that they can understand themselves and be more confident in using the printers. I really like these pressurized systems. They're really cool. So anyhow, going back to the cartridge, I can now clip the line. Take the cartridge out. Okay. Now let's say my cartridge was clogged. Just unclip the line. And like I said, if it starts to feel like it's cement, then I definitely don't want to pull anymore unless I shake up the cartridge and make sure that the cartridge has white diffused throughout the whole cartridge. So we can do that and just shake it up enough, and then you want to come back with a syringe and just make sure that you pull the white ink. If it's going to be really hard and you've done this a few times, then the best thing to do is just change your cartridges. So just make sure you change the cartridge if it's too much on the syringe and it feels like concrete. And it's a good idea to have some cartridges handy because you don't really know when these are going to go out anyways, even if you've done everything that you needed to do and you've done your maintenance at the beginning of the day. So now we can put this back. It's also good to have an extra set of cartridges on hand for these printers, just in case you need to flush out as well. So just make sure you have another bottle set handy so that once the 2.5 to 3 month mark comes, then you'll definitely be able to flush the system out correctly and properly. Another thing too to consider is the fact that we get these kind of questions asked a lot. Is the ink bay, how reliable is the ink bay, and do clogs occur inside the ink bay? Okay, this goes for 3880 systems, this goes for P600 systems, this goes for R3000 and P600 systems. The ink bay is very reliable. I have customers over a year using the ink bay, and clogs usually do not occur there. They start in the damper area. So more than likely it's in the damper area. Sometimes after so long people have to waterfall the head, which I do have a video on how to waterfall the head. But 99.999% of the time the ink bay is not your culprit. It's starting from point A to point C, or your dampers. So you don't need to replace a whole ink bay 99.999, whatever it is percent of the time. It's either the cartridge, connector, your bag, or a damper, or even, like I said, you might need a waterfall one line on the printhead. So other than that, if you guys have any questions, or girls, I don't like to say guys as guys and girls, but if you do have any question, just write in the comments and we'll be sure to answer it. Thank you.